Hey everyone, and welcome back. Now today we're going to be talking about Solana because we're seeing something in the market right now that I think is very, very important to highlight. And frankly, I think this is a pretty rare thing that we see kind of being acknowledged in crypto overall. And so I did want to talk about it a little bit more generally. This is something that I think could kind of apply to anything, but at least right now, I think Solana is an absolutely perfect example of what we are seeing in the market happening right now. And so essentially, I just wanted to use Solana kind of as like an example. We can take a look at kind of what we're seeing here, why maybe, things could be looking better now than they were a couple weeks ago, why Solana could potentially even be a strong buy, and why when we look at some of these dips that happened like we saw a couple weeks ago, why maybe we shouldn't be scared off by them. I know I made a video a couple weeks back about talking about Solana specifically and talking about hey, if you were willing to spend $260 on Solana a couple weeks ago, why would you not be willing to spend $180 or $170 on Solana today? It makes absolutely no sense. And so we're starting to see a little bit of that kind of being priced back into the market. And so we're going to take a super close look at that today. But before we go into that though, I did want to take a quick look at crypto bubbles just to kind of get an overall sense of what's going on in the market. What we can see, actually, let's go back to day, not week. On the day, basically everything is green. We're seeing a pretty nice, strong bounce to start out the new year, which is really good. Many things up over 10%. We talked about Tau earlier today. We can see they're up 15% on the day. Jasmy up 8%, XRP 14%, which is looking really good. Cardano up over 10%. AI16Z still running. We can see they're at close to a $2.5 billion market cap, which is just wild. 500% in the past month. Pretty crazy stuff, but also a lot of what AI agents are doing within crypto is pretty impressive. So I'm not saying that these values and some of the extreme run-ups that we have seen, particularly from AI16Z and virtuals, are not warranted. It's also wild to see, moves like this. We can see almost 50% on the week, getting close to that $5 mark, peaking at 490 at about 480 right now. And for the month up over 200%, which again, really, really good. Now, again, this is a Solana video, so I don't want to get too distracted by what's going on in the overall market, but we can see the overall market looking pretty good, seeing a strong bounce. Solana only up about 3.4% that we can see. I'll drag this bubble a little bit, only up about 3.4%. So not a whole bunch of, definitely not leading the market like we saw basically for the most of last year, but things looking pretty good for Solana. If we do look at the Solana chart, and let's actually go ahead and zoom in here, we can see a couple of things that are happening here. So we are starting to see a little bit of a bounce from what we saw right here. This was kind of like a large liquidity zone. We did see bounces or drops, I guess I should say, all the way to the very bottom. We actually saw it kind of break momentarily out of this liquidity zone, hitting about $175 at its low, and then right now we're sitting at about 197, just shy of 200, almost back to the mean of the Bollinger Band. We can see indicated by the orange line here. Now, things looking pretty good. We can also tell this is a decent level of resistance that's kind of formed. We could see price getting rejected on multiple different occasions at this around $200 range. So, and I think that kind of makes sense. Again, all these round numbers and 5s, 10s, 50s, 100s, things like that, always a little bit more of psychological barriers here. And so 200, again, kind of turning into a somewhat difficult resistance that we are seeing here. Not super worrisome, not super unexpected either, frankly. But what we can see is we have seen that really nice bounce and potentially a little bit of an ascending wedge if we do look at the price. Again, this is daily, so we might be able to draw a little bit more accurate wedge on the hourly or maybe even the 4 hourly. But we can see kind of something like that happening here. Ascending wedge is usually a good sign that we are going to see a breakout at some point. Given the price action we have seen recently with this bounce off the bottom of the wedge, maybe it's possible that we see this happen within the next day or two, or maybe we come back to the lower trend line and then maybe take another run at it. But overall, I mean, this is essentially a really, really good example. And this is what I wanted to kind of talk a little bit more about today. Because we look at the RSI, things getting very, very close to oversold at this point. We could also see pulling out of the bottom of these Bollinger Bands. And as I've talked about before, when we see price creep out of these Bollinger Band bounds, almost certain that we are going to see price coming back in. We can see here, we see price come out here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I guess 6 candles. So this is one, again, this is peak mania, and we saw 6 candles here. We saw, just barely peaks kind of coming out here. We see price come out here, 1, 2, and then 3. We're essentially back in on the second candle, the second full candle after we see price close. Something here, price comes out, we're back in within a candle. Price comes out, we're back in within a candle. A lot of different things like this. We can see price closes here, 1, 2, 3, we're back in. So, very, very common to see kind of within 3 to 5 candles. That's kind of when things are going to be coming back into the range. We can see that here, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, and now the fifth one we're back in. So when we start to see things like this, we know that price is going to be very overextended, particularly when we're pairing this up with RSI almost getting on the oversold end of things as well. And so now what we're seeing right now, things coming back to neutral, things looking a little bit more stable here. Some pretty decent like structure on the chart forming. Overall, Solana in a somewhat decent position, right? And now I wanted to kind of pair this with a look. This is essentially like a very technical view of what we're looking at with Solana, right? And I want to go take a look at more like fundamentally what we're seeing on Solana as well. But before we do that, if you are looking to be trading Solana, Bitcoin, Ethereum, anything for that matter, feel free to use my link in the description below. I am still working with BTCC. They are still doing that 10% bonus on first time deposits, which is a really, really great deal. And keep in mind, this is in addition to the extra bonuses of up to $10,055 per user. So really, really, really good deals here. If you are looking for a new exchange or potentially even a secondary exchange, some really good options here. Also, they've been around for 13 years. So, you know, very little risk of them being one of those like here today, gone tomorrow types of things. Also, you can see they've got 300 plus crypto futures and up to 500x leverage. Again, I would strongly discourage leverage that high. At that point, it's getting very, very close to basically just gambling. If you have a strategy that, you know, requires very, very high leverage and you know what you're doing, then, you know, maybe it's all right. But especially if you're a beginner, probably just stay away from leverage to begin with overall. But BTCC does also have spot exchanges too. So if you're not looking to trade leverage while maybe you learn how to trade leverage, but you just want to kind of trade the actual asset overall, you can do that on BTCC. So definitely a ton of options there. Also no VPN or KYC necessary if that is something that's important to you. So like I said, if you are interested, just click my link in the description below and you will go get that 10% bonus on those first time deposits. So anyway, now moving on, I want to take a little bit more of a look at the fundamental data and kind of discuss a little bit more about what I'm meaning in kind of like the technical versus fundamental, and also a really, really important concept that I think is vastly overlooked in crypto, which is price versus value. And so we're going to talk about the kind of the caveat, the differences between those two, how you can kind of judge them, and essentially like use that as like part of your investing strategy. Again, now keep in mind that this is not financial advice. This is just kind of how I tend to view investing. If this is not something that makes sense to you, obviously, you know, that's totally fine. Don't use it if it doesn't make sense. But hopefully for many of you, this will start to make sense of like how you can look at investments and make sure that you're not, you know, buying high and selling low, like can happen to many, many beginners within crypto. So what we can see here is we are looking at DeFi Llama, and we can see we have TVL of Solana as well as many, many other metrics. We're going to be looking at several of them, but to start, just to kind of keep this chart clean and not have a whole bunch of like, you know, chaos going through, I am going to just be looking at stablecoins and TVL. So if we look, we'll cut this down a tiny bit, not a whole lot, just because I want to show what was happening kind of in the prior bull run as well. So in the prior bull run, we can see we did hit TVL of over 10 billion, which we have not returned to. Kind of at the peak, we saw TVL of about 9.5, so getting very, very close, but not quite there yet. Also with stablecoins on chain, we could see again at the peak, we saw about 6.2 billion, and now we're coming back. I think we've actually finally crossed 5, just over 5 billion on the stable coins. So things looking good there, but we haven't quite come back to those previous all-time highs in either TVL or stablecoin market cap. Now this is one of the metrics that I'm using to essentially try and time the top of the market. Given that we haven't returned to previous highs, I think there are still some more opportunities for gains to be had. Again, not financial advice. I can't tell the future. I mean, we could have topped in November, December, and that could be it, right? But at least from what I'm looking at, I tend to think that that's not actually the case. What we can see here though is, you know, we haven't actually returned to those all-time highs. But we need to keep in mind is when we were seeing this type of stuff happening for Solana, this is before FTX. We can see kind of when FTX happened, when basically all of the deposits just rushed off of Solana within like a, you know, 2-3 month time period, and then it's essentially was almost dead, and then it's started to climb up basically ever since then. Now looking, we can see also here on the TVL, this is back when Solana was basically vaporware. They didn't really have much going for them. They didn't really do a whole lot. And then obviously we saw TVL go down to very, very, very minimal amounts, you know, 200 million, you know, just shy of 250 million kind of being the lows, at least kind of from some quick analysis of what I'm seeing here. We can see, again, it's climbed its way all the way back up, both on stablecoins and TVL. Now you might be asking, well, why do you care about stablecoins? Because stablecoins, I mean, that has nothing to do with Solana, right? But the reason that I care about stablecoins and the reason that I kind of use this as an almost indirect indicator of the value of Solana is because what we can see is if you have stablecoins, my reasoning at least is like, you have like there's enough stuff to do and there's enough interesting things on that chain that you want to have some liquidity there that maybe isn't just like in Solana only, but there's enough stuff there that you essentially would like to have some of your assets just sitting on that chain permanently. This is why I think having stablecoin, or like tracking the stablecoin market cap, is so important, is because if there's really nothing to do on the chain, people aren't going to hold their stablecoins there. Also, TVL can kind of be a little bit misleading, because if the price of the coin really does blow up, much of this TVL can just be price appreciation from that coin, right? Because if you had, in a very simplistic example, if you had 10 coins on this chain, they're all worth $1, you have $10 of TVL, right? But let's say that coin, because it's the chain that it's on, 10x's because people think this chain is going to be super cool, and it goes to $10. Well, now the TVL on this chain is $100. It looks like TVL has gone up 10x, which it has technically, because we're looking at it in US dollars, but it's not necessarily from any sort of organic growth, right? So let's say, again, going back to this example, we go from $10 to $120, we might see that TVL 12x'd, but we're not considering the fact that 10 of that 12x was just price appreciation from the coin. If we're going back to, like, again, real dollar value on chain, only 20 of those $120 is realistically like net new additions to the chain. And so that's why it's really, really important, at least in my opinion, to not only just look at TVL, but look at stable coins too, because while we can't really, I guess we could maybe back into like the delta net of price change, but that would be kind of like a pretty like complex thing. And I'm not totally sure if we have the ability to like see that type of stuff. And so I kind of like to use stable coins as a somewhat indirect way to view this without having to go through and like do all these like, black box type of calculations and whatnot. And so hopefully you can see that like if we are seeing a sustained move up like this, the value of the chain is increasing. Now, again, if we're seeing the same type of thing with TVL, the value of the chain is increasing, but how much of it, like we can see, TVL being at like 9 billion. We can see here TVL is about 300 million. The difference between these is like 30x or something. The value of the Solana token didn't quite do a 30x, at least from like, where we were looking at from here to here. And so this is why we can see that like there was some value accrual on chain that wasn't just Solana, but again, a lot of it is going to be Solana probably. So that's just one thing to keep in mind is, again, value versus price. So we can see here, let's take a look back at like, this was, middle of November, November 21st. This is probably the first point where Solana peaked, and we're seeing TVL of about 9 billion and stablecoins of about 4.6 billion. Right now, we're seeing stablecoins of about 5.2 and TVL of about 8.5. If we go back and we look at Solana's price, again, 21st of November, it's almost the peak. We actually peaked on the 22nd, but we can see the price was almost $260 here. It's now 200. So price is down. What is that? Like 20-ish%, a little bit more than 20%, but stablecoins on chain are up. So basically what we've seen from Solana when price has basically gone only down is the value has gone almost only up, right? And so this is a really, really important concept to understand because, again, the way I talk about investing, the way I look at investing is it's all about maximum risk to maximum reward. If you were willing to pay $260 for a Solana when TVL was 9.2 billion, stablecoins were 4.6 billion because you felt like the value of the ecosystem was worthwhile, why would you not pay less than 200 for an ecosystem where TVL is 8.7 billion, again, a little bit lower, but stablecoin market cap is 5.2 billion, which is much, much higher. That's like over 10% in the span of 6 weeks. That to me seems like the ecosystem is more valuable. Now we can also look at some other things. We can look at fees, we can look at volume. Actually, let's do only fees first. We can see we did have fees peaking at this point, and fees have kind of been down only since then. So this is another thing kind of going into the price configuration here. But again, this is kind of like a relatively short-term thing. We could kind of see that just based on the level of growth. This type of growth doesn't necessarily happen sustainably. There is kind of like a downside to it that we will see. You can see here, up, down, but again, we're seeing higher lows than what we were seeing prior to that. Up, down, higher lows still. Again, up, down, higher lows even still. Some of the lows that we're seeing are like the highs that we were seeing from like early in March and April. So that's kind of how we're looking at, again, in terms of value. If we look at volume, similar type of thing. We can see the lows in volume, again, are like comparable to highs of what we were seeing in early 2024. So overall, we are continuing to see the Solana ecosystem grow and mature and continue to essentially provide more value, but price has gone down. So in my opinion, this looks like essentially a better risk to reward because value's only gone up, price has only gone down. Now again, we need to determine how overvalued Solana might have been at the point when people were paying $260 for for a Solana, but that's a whole different issue that we can kind of talk about in a future video. But overall, hopefully you found the information in this video useful. Hopefully you could kind of understand how I was getting to some of these claims that I was making as far as price versus value and TVL. This happens again, like I was saying at the beginning of the video. This is a universal thing that you can find in crypto. Just so happens, in my opinion, Solana is like one of the most obvious examples of this right now. And so again, hopefully you found the information in this video useful. If you did, please do give me a like and subscribe. It really, really does help me out, especially pushing this video to more people and helping more people kind of just learn about what's going on in crypto and all that type of stuff. So also, if you have any comments, questions, concerns, anything like that, just drop those in the comment section below. I do try to read and respond to all of my comments. So if you have anything that you want me to see, that'd be a great way to do so. And you'll be hearing from me as well. So thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next video.